So I'm passionate about case writing, and I think it's an extremely effective way to learn for really three reasons. First of all, it's active, people are engaged. And number two, it shows the complexity and the difficulty of business disciplines. I mean, often people think marketing, for example, which is my area, is very easy. Find what people want and give it to them. But actually you put it in a real context, you realize it's really hard. And the last reason, I think, it's because just for learning and memory, if you just have a long list of do's and don'ts, it's just so boring, people will not remember them. But if they actually have to work on a case and argue about it, then they will remember it, and many years later, your students will go and say, oh, I remember this case, it was so interesting, I talked about it with my friends, etc. Finally, I think there's one aspect which is really important, is teaching. It teaches the participants to be good speakers. Be articulate, be able to convince others in a meeting or in a public setting, which is actually a very important skill for managers to have. I will first of all look whether there is a need for a case. I don't believe that everything should be taught as a case method. There are lots of advantages, but it's not for everything. And I'll be very pragmatic about it. I will say, write a case if there's no existing good case about it. But also write a case because it will help you establish your credibility as an instructor, especially if you're new, if you're young, if you're new to the topic. Having at least one case in your syllabus will establish your credibility and will be very important for the students, the participants, and also for you to learn, which is of course the most important aspect. I think the best cases are those that are written in collaboration with the company, when you get the insider information about what happened, but also why, and what else could they have been doing, what else did they consider doing. And so it's very important that you get open access to the company. And so my rule is very simple. From the very beginning, you need to gauge whether the company is interested in this. The companies differ a lot. There are some that are really secret and some that would love to have the word out. And if you sense from the beginning that there is some reluctance or they call the lawyers, then I would say, just don't do it. There are enough companies out there who understand the value of getting the word out about what they do internally, who understand also that the case is not a PR event, it's not free publicity. A case is about telling the truth, and it's a pedagogical tool. And so there are enough companies who understand these two aspects of cases that if you sense the company you're interested in is a bit reluctant, I would just tell them to go and look for another company. I still like to have a written document. I think the students appreciate having a paper. It's actually a fairly good medium. You can write on it, you can bring it, you don't need to plug it anywhere. But it has to be augmented with additional material. So all the cases that I've written, for example, there is not just the paper and the PDF, but there's actually a website where I can post videos, I can post links, and these videos are an important part of the success of the case. I also even more for the teaching note than for the case. I actually think the teaching note is more important than the case. You really need to provide additional information for the instructor to have information asymmetry so they can know more than the students and tell them something they didn't know. So for example, in all my websites, there's a restricted area just for the teachers where they can get additional videos, additional PowerPoint presentations, and also sometimes a video of me teaching the case so they can get a feel for what goes on in the classroom. And so I think it's important to have a mix of everything. I personally don't like when it's entirely online because I like to have something that I can print and distribute to the students. I personally found both types of work, working with companies on case studies and doing academic research extremely interesting. In my personal experience, the synergies haven't been that high because of what I research. It's a bit different from what I teach, but it really depends. There are some colleagues where it's just incredibly aligned. So for some people, it's really combining case writing and teaching. For others, it's more about balancing. But I think there are two really important parts of my job, and I've learned from both, especially because I've been really fortunate to work with great companies who understand the value of case studies, like L'Oréal, for example. I think I've learned a lot from working with these companies, independently of what I've learned from my research. So the first advice in terms of teaching, unfortunately, is, work. There is no shortcut. I wish there were. But the second and perhaps more interesting is really you have to show that you care. Okay, students don't really care what you know if they don't know that you care. It's very simple, but it's true. And if they see that you're passionate and you're genuine about it, they will cut you a lot of slack, even if not everything is perfect. And the last thing I would say is, think about the teaching as a student. Actually, it's a very useful exercise to be sitting in someone else's classes for 2-3 hours and see how uncomfortable the chair is and how boring it can be if it's just one-way monologue. So try to have a mix of long cases, short cases, lectures, videos, guest speakers, so that you facilitate the learning and avoid being just too top-down.